Joining conference now. This conference is being recorded by the organizer.
I mean, he's finally seemed to be coming into his own. Ingram is still young because he doesn't have a ton of touches, even though he's in the league 6 years. I mean, sure, you can replace running backs. I mean, if we had the ability to just grab Fournette right now and it didn't hurt us and we had a solid defense and offensive line, I'd do it. But honestly, besides the O-line, there's nothing I would change on offense. I mean, the pieces are all there. I mean, keep in mind, we're talking about we have 3 injured offensive linemen, 2 of them starters. Plus, on the right side, which has ended up probably been our best side all year because they haven't been injured, you got 2 guys well past their prime in their mid-30s at right tackle and right guard in Streif and Evans. I mean, if you're able to replace that with a decent line, think of what you would have. I mean, the reason that we give Thomas and guys like Sproles all that success and talk is because they had a Super Bowl and Pro Bowl level offensive line with guys like Stinchcomb, Evans in his prime, Nix, even Zach Streif 6 years ago was pretty dang good at right tackle. I mean, so the only thing I want to work on is the offensive line about 2 spots.
Oh, no question. Now, I agree with that as well. The offensive line does need to be upgraded, considering that you do have, 2 spots that need to be solidified on the right side, as you said. But my point was never to say let's get rid of Ingram. The Saints were at their best when they had an Ingram type of player. Ingram reminds me a lot of, he's growing into more of a Pierre Thomas than maybe of a Reggie Bush or a C.J. Spiller or a Darren Sproles will ever be. But I still think if you add another guy to that mix, look, definitely you keep Ingram. If you want to get yourself another physical guy like Tim Hightower trying to fill that role, and I think Daniel Lasco would definitely kind of become that power back, if you will, to kind of complement Mark Ingram's shiftiness and his ability to do pretty much everything. He's more like I said, he's more like a Pierre Thomas to me because he can do pretty much anything you ask of him. But I still think they're going to need that multi-purpose, that scat back, that Reggie Bush, that satellite type that they can line up outside, as well as moving to the slot. Now, a guy like Christian McCaffrey comes to mind when I say that, because I think if you put him in the Saints offense, that's about as pick your poison as it'll ever get in the NFL. I mean, that's the Saints in 2009. That's the Saints in 2011 when they were the record-setting Saints. They were pretty much the greatest show on turf or any field surface for that matter. I mean, you couldn't stop the Saints offense in 2011. It didn't matter who you were. And I really feel like, and the Saints will tell you that themselves, that they really feel like they gave one away in 2011. That should have been their second Super Bowl. But I think if they can get another back like that to complement Ingram and to complement a power back, maybe a Daniel Lasco to Tim Hightower type, if they can get that key element, as well as fix the O-line, because you're absolutely right on that, I think this offense will be unstoppable. And the offense can be, once again, that type of offense that can generate 30 points on a bad day. Then that also helps the defense. A lot of people get confused how great the 2009 defense were. Statistically, they were not a great defense. They were a very opportunistic defense, and that helped them out a lot because they were able to capitalize when a team, made a mistake, possibly turning, interceptions into points, and if not, definitely flipping the field and giving Drew Brees and the offense another crack at it. That's all the Saints really need. If the Saints are a middle-of-the-road defense, but they can create turnovers, it's a world of a difference, especially with the offense, as you said, with those young receivers and those young guys. It could be a very big difference.
Well, let me throw this out. Has become that type of back you're describing, and a perfect example is the Carolina game. Ingram swung out wide as a wide receiver. Luke Kuechly, the best player on that defense, went over to guard Mark Ingram. Had that have been a Tim Hightower, Travaris Cadet, a safety or nickel corner would have taken that role. But Mark Ingram drew Luke Kuechly, and that play resulted in a touchdown. Ingram was not a part of that play. He didn't put his hands on the football, but he took away the best player on defense. That is the very definition of X factor. No, he might not be a flashy player. He might not be the player New Orleans wants. They've made that very obvious in the past 6 years. But he is exactly what the team needs. He is the Batman of our Arkham City. And it's sad that Saints fans can't seem to respect that. He has literally changed his entire game from Alabama to where he is now and is succeeding in doing so. But Saints fans seem to be struggling with seeing that. And that's why, to me, it comes down to the line. The reason that the Saints team was so successful in 2009 and 11 is because they had, between those 3 years, 5 Pro Bowl offensive linemen at every position. 2 of those were all pro guys. That is why that team was so successful. It had nothing to do with the wide receivers they had, the running backs they had. It did have a lot to do with the quarterback they had under center. But that's it. Rebuild that line, you'll see success. Why is Dallas so successful in their run game and with Dak Prescott? Because they have a great, solid line.
That offensive line.
Why is New England always consistently good? Because they always have very good offensive line performance and stats. Look at Kansas City. Kansas City was the poster child for a strong, powerful offensive line, especially in the run game. That's what you need to win the NFL. The trenches on both sides are what is the most important in this game still. Not flashy running backs, not great wide receivers. Not, Julio Jones is maybe the best receiver in the NFL. Atlanta's already started their yearly collapse because they don't have a great O-line, and people are starting to get to Matt Ryan's face and put pressure on him. That's what the Saints need.
No question. I mean, it's clear that when the Saints were at their best, I've made this point myself when speaking of it because I've always considered the Saints, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the game, pretty much everybody is at this point, it's spades.
Mm-hmm. I love spades, man.
Yeah. So I've always said the Saints were basically a spades hand. There were two in the possible when it came to the offensive line. You knew you had Unger, you knew you had Armstead, and as long as those two guys were healthy, you knew you had them. But Pete was the possible because he could possibly be a player in the future, and as it turns out, he's looking a lot more comfortable now. Or he could have been a possible bust. You didn't really know what you had there. But what you did know, you didn't have, was you knew Zach Strief at the time, was very, was aging. It wasn't the Zach Strief we all know and love. And the same thing before Jari Evans was brought in. You had Senio Clemente and you had Tim Lelito basically there trying to man those spots. Well, the good thing is the Saints have solidified their offensive line to a degree. And who would have known that Jari Evans would be the glue that holds the Saints line together, which bothers me to some degree. Because if Jari Evans was that important, then shame on the Saints for letting him walk and shame on Jari for not taking a pay cut because those two parties definitely needed each other. However, with that being said, if the Saints can somehow put together another good offensive line, and they should, because simply you're already trying to build a young defense. If you can rebuild that O-line on the fly, and I think this offseason, I definitely think the Saints are going to trade for a right guard. Some type of way, shape, or form. Maybe I know a lot of people were clamoring for Ron Leary at one time. Maybe they make the move with Dallas and possibly get it this time. But I think they'll do that, and then they'll try to look for a right tackle somewhere along the lines of maybe signing one via free agency or just drafting one. But I think rebuilding that line is very critical, especially if you're going to be putting a new quarterback in a year or two behind that line. You're definitely going to have to do it. My take is the Saints are building to be more of a fast-paced defense, and they're going to try to find them a game manager because finding another Drew Brees, good luck with that.
Yeah, and say I'm really feeling this tangent because the Big Izzy Believer just released an article like 10 minutes ago why Ingram should possibly be traded, and this stuff is just kind of getting to the point now where it's it's making me irate because it's the silliest notion, but here's why. Let's rattle off some stuff. Mark Ingram just moved into the top 5 NFL rushing all time for the New Orleans Saints. Quietly, nobody's talking about that. But, Mark Ingram is top 5. Guess who some names he passed. I'm going to pull them up for us because I want to make sure I get the actual ratings right. I don't want to name the fourth one, who was the fifth one, that type of deal. But Mark Ingram is 5th in Saints history in rushing. He's passed Reuben Mays. He's passed Chuck Muncie. He's passed Ricky Williams. He's passed Tony Galbraith. He's going to pass Pierre Thomas this year, should he not be injured. Also note this. He's doing it in 2 years less than Pierre Thomas did. He's going to pass Pierre Thomas this year for 4th. Here's another one for you. There are 3 New Orleans Saints running backs who have led the team in rushing for 4 years or more. 3 of them. One of them is Mark Ingram. The other is Deuce McAllister. And the other is George Rogers. Some pretty big names. Pierre Thomas didn't do it. Darren Sproles didn't do it. Ricky Williams didn't do it. None of those guys did it. Mario Bates didn't do it. Dalton Hillard didn't do it. Rogers, Ingram, and McAllister. Those are 2 pretty big areas for me personally that I think deserve a lot of credit. And they're not given to him. They're just not. For a guy to be consistently that good, and not only has he done that historically, he's improving. He has become a receiving threat out of the backfield that he was not before. As an example, he is catching, I think it's like 85, 86% of his targets he's catching right now, higher than almost every wide receiver.
The number is pretty good. I couldn't tell you the exact number. I know I heard the stat a while ago, but
I'll pull it up in just a second. I'll let you talk so I can pull it up, but I think it's around that number. Stuff like that. And the guy, people are now talking about, because the article led with this, the fumble, Sunday's game. That was his 4th lost fumble of his career, his 7th total fumble in 6 years. We watched a certain guy named Adrian Peterson, who is the best running back we've seen in a decade, do that number almost in one game against the New Orleans Saints. And yet we're trying to crucify this guy for one game where he averaged 3.9 yards a carry and scored a touchdown. Seriously?
I'll give you a chance to find your numbers, and I'll just elaborate and say this real quick. I love Barry and the guys over at the Big Easy Believer. I do. I think they do phenomenal work, and I don't ever want it to be misconstrued that I'm taking a shot at them. But I think sometimes the emotion and the fan side of you can come out. And I try my hardest to never let that happen to me, and just kind of see the world through the third eye, if you will, just when it comes to the Saints, just kind of look at it unbiasedly as I can. I try to call a spade, and I get into a lot of arguments behind that, because people they don't like the truth. They want their version of the truth. They don't want your version or the version of the truth. They want theirs. When it comes to Mark Ingram, the truth is there's nothing he can do that will satisfy the mob, if you will. There's nothing he can do. Mark Ingram, as you stated, he's going to be 4th all time in rushing. He can rush for, he should have had a 1,000-yard rushing season already. The only person that stopped him was Sean Payton. So, the guy can pretty much do it all, but he'll never get the full credit for it. As you said, he's evolved and become a better receiver out of the backfield. He's a better blocker. He's the most versatile back on the Saints offense as far as reliability is concerned. And the only thing that has stopped Mark Ingram from being not good, not great, but elite is injuries. That's the only thing that has stopped him thus far. That's pretty much been it. There's only 2 things that have stopped Mark Ingram: Sean Payton not running the ball, and Mark Ingram being injured. If you take away those 2 things, if Mark Ingram is on the Dallas Cowboys right now, he's going to be considered the best back in football, because that line is going to block for him. He's going to get the carries, and mind you, as you stated, all the numbers that you put out. The catch percentage, the rushing total, the fact that he's only lost 4 fumbles in his career, all of those numbers mean absolutely nothing. And the reason why they don't, because Mark Ingram has to share carries. So all of the numbers that he's put up having to share carries with the backfield. Now, are there some times when Mark Ingram just drives me nuts when he seems like he runs into the back of the pile? Absolutely. But Mark Ingram is doing what the play is drawing up for him to do. You know what would be nice? If the offensive line opened the hole right there. And the bottom line is the defenders get paid to stop Mark Ingram. They're not just going to sit there and say, oh, that's Mark, let me let him go. They get paid to stop him. So it's kind of crazy that he receives so much hate. I get upset with him, too, when he runs into a 2-yard pile and he falls around, or when he looks like he's about to break one, but one guy trips him up. But, look, if you give me 7 yards to carry and you get tripped up every time, I'm okay with that, because every 2 times you carry the ball, that's a first down, and eventually we'll get to the end zone. Saints are a pass-happy offense. The numbers that Mark Ingram is doing is phenomenal. I was very hard on Mark early in his career. I've come to learn that the guy's a lot better than what we've seen, and maybe it was the blocking scheme change that the Saints went through.
It certainly helped him. That definitely fits his style a lot more. He's not a man blocking type of running back. He's that one cut back. So that switch has helped a lot. But I think it's more than just that switch, because what's really come out from him is his usefulness, and there's really another word for it, in the passing game. When Darren Sproles left, we looked for somebody to fill that void. We looked to guys like Cadet to fill the void. We looked to C.J. Spiller to fill the void. But honestly, who filled the void? Mark Ingram. He had 400 yards receiving last year as a running back. He's got 154 this year. He'll probably end up right around the same 400 number. And he's at, I think, 490 total